Well, let's hear your comments on this Constitutional Court ruling about corporal punishment in our homes. And the social media hashtag is the Modise Network. In the studio, I'm with family lawyer from Beverley Clark of Clark's Attorneys in Johannesburg, and our Cape Town studios, Shahana Mai Social Worker at the Parent Center. It's one thing for the Constitutional Court to say what it has said, Beverley, but again, I said before the break that we live in a particular context. The ruling is out there. People who listen to such judgments may know, but probably a substantial number of South Africans are not aware of this. Are there any efforts, you think, from the court or from anywhere that are going to be undertaken to make sure that more parents are informed about this?
Tim, I think that it is... there's going to be development of the law, and there's going to be a process whereby parents are educated and, in fact, children are educated. And I think that that's one of the things that many of the groupings are afraid of, is when children are educated. But our Constitutional Court specifically sees one of its roles as being an educative one. And so it educates the public about things like this, and so about different ways of doing things. And that's why programs like this are important, and then the actual programs that are being run by people like Shahana. In Johannesburg there are a number. There's Smart Choice Parenting, there's FAMSA, there are various places parents can go to learn better ways of doing things, and it's just part of the progression and development of our society. And I think in a country where we have a crisis of violence, it stands to reason that we should all, in a conscious way, be trying to do things better.
Now, Shahana, obviously parents who come to you and say they want to learn better ways of disciplining their children, one could argue that those are the converted, right? And what happens with those who are not converted? Who's reaching out to them?
Okay. So just to go a little back on what Beverley mentioned, also to add to that, the Department of Social Development will actually be rolling out some programs in terms of self-awareness of parents, parenting skills. And I think that is something that is very welcome, because it is about a national drive that we need to go. So the work actually starts now. In terms of your question now, basically, yes, we get a handful of parents who come in looking for support and looking for help because they've realized that they're struggling. But we also have a fair amount of referrals from the court. So parents who are in cases of divorce or abuse as such, or challenges with drug, or children struggling at school, those referrals come to us. So many times those parents are not willing for the new change that they're embracing, but they come because they've been instructed to come through. And through our process of counseling, as well as our support systems and as well as our running of the programs, we will allow the parent to go through a process of helping them understand and become mindful and become aware and conscious of this new shift. It's not easy, but again, we are equipped enough to deal with parents who come in with those kind of situations. So we get a fair amount of a balance of that, and that helps us in terms of seeing the growth. And I think to see a parent who's come in unwillingly, but knowing that they would like a desired outcome, not necessarily their relationship with their child, but something else. And through the process, the relationship with the child gets developed, and that is enhanced. That is a beautiful, beautiful flow that is very, very welcome, and it's very consciously descriptive in how we know we can help parents.
From the point of view of children then, are there any outreach programs that will take this information to them, or do you allow children, to put the question differently, to come to your center for advice on how to form working, peaceful, non-violent relationships with their parents?
As the Parent Center, we're focusing on parents themselves, parents and caregivers, in terms of enhancing their relationship with their children. So we don't necessarily deal with the children themselves. We do sometimes encourage children to come into a counseling session with parents if we feel the necessity, to be able to get a better understanding of the dynamics of the relationship, to get a better understanding of the conduct of where the parent is struggling. But then we would refer to organizations that deal specifically with children. Our focus as the Parent Center is on the parents and the caregivers themselves.
Now, the court has ruled in the way that it has ruled, Beverley, but does it criminalize in any way corporal punishment? It says that's not the appropriate form of chastisement, yes, but if it's not criminalized, some parents will just continue.
No, it is now criminalized throughout the country. So previously, although hitting your child was prima facie assault, you had a defense that it was reasonable chastisement. And that, I should tell you, was a defense until fairly recently in our law. That was a defense for hitting your wife as well. So the defense of reasonable chastisement was what excused the behavior. That defense is no longer available. So it is now assault in the same way as anybody else would be assaulted. But there seems to be, I think, a sense of panic from people that parents are now, that the long arm of the law is going to insert itself into your home, and people are going to be arrested left, right and centre for smacking their children. I don't think that's the case at all. Our law has a principle called, which is the de minimis principle, that the law is not going to involve itself with trifles. Prosecutors and police are not going to involve themselves with parents who just give their children a smack. So I don't think that that people don't need to panic about it. But I think that the part of the educative effect of this judgment is to make parents think. Just think first. When you're about to discipline your child, think, what is the best way to do it? What is the positive way to do it? What are my opportunities here? And so hopefully we will go through a slow process like what Shahana is talking about, and through all the outreach programs.
Well, and I'm asking you the question because, I'm imagining children by their large numbers now, those who are watching a program such as this one, and lodging cases against their parents and saying, I was given 3 or 6 of the best lashes by my mother or father, and therefore I'm opening a case against them. Yeah.
And they would be entitled to do so. And that is why parents are going to have to think twice before they do give them 6 of the best. But I think that a simple, small smack on the bum immediately a child has done something. What I'm saying is that is not going to, that's not going to attract a criminal charge. But giving your child 6 of the best may well attract a criminal charge, but then there's a process that has to be gone through. The parent would follow due process, and in all likelihood, unless it is a serious assault, like in the case that actually gave rise to this particular judgment, where the parent had really beaten and kicked his child. But in other cases, for instance, with a planned sort of 6 of the best, you're probably going to find that parents are put on a diversion program, which means actually that they will be sent to programs like Shahana's, where they will be taught better ways of doing things. They're not going to be going to jail.
Well, Shahana, actually, I want you to comment on this because, and also advise parents who might be watching this program this morning that when parents use corporal punishment, right, and some of them, extreme measures of corporal punishment, they don't see themselves as violent people. They believe that they are discharging their parental responsibilities. Can you talk us through the psychology, if you will, of such a person, and what is it that parents should reflect on when they are just about to punish their children or apply corporal punishment?
I think we need to understand where the parent's coming from and what's happening within their headspace. Often parents have a struggle and you hear words like, my child's not listening to me. My child doesn't do what I asked them to do. I've told them many times and now I've had enough and now I need to raise my voice, and then they take further measures from there. We need to understand that it's not about our child listening to us. Rather, we need to focus on the fact that our child's watching us constantly. They're watching us all the time, and we as role models, what are we presenting to them? So, like Beverley mentioned, in terms of just pausing and taking a look at what's happening, one of the tools we teach parents is the robot. A very simple tool to basically stop with red, stop, calm down, breathe, and just get into a bit different headspace. Then the yellow would be to actually look at what's happening around me. What is the situation? What am I brought into that's creating a feeling of conflict within me, and this child and I are at loggerheads with each other. And from that point of view, the parent can then go into the green, which is responding rather than reacting. Many a times parents jump straight to green and react, and that is where the challenge comes in. But we teach the parents this process of when you're responding to the child, you think about, what am I teaching my child? How can I appropriately respond with the best intention for my child to be able to create a disciplined behavior pattern, to create something that's different. So my expectations and my house rules are A, my child's doing B. I would like to guide my child, and in giving them the responsibility, you're actually helping the child to learn to be able to respond in a way that is more able, and they're feeling confident that they can take charge and control. And in that respect, we will help the child then to feel stronger in terms of their self-esteem, to be able to be raised as a more independent thinker, to be a more self-controlled teenager, hopefully, and then go into the adult world, managing their behavior patterns. Regardless of whether they agree or disagree with people, it's more about, how am I going to voice my disagreement? How am I going to voice what I'm thinking, which is different to the other person, without enforcing something harsh and destructive in terms of punishment, in terms of verbalizing in a negative way, in terms of raising my hand and being physically violent. And that is how we can change society.
Sure.
But it does take one step at a time, and it's a process.
So when we talk about criminalizing corporal punishment, what sort of punishment then from the state can be imposed on a parent who uses corporal punishment? That's number one. Number two, if you are a neighbor and you observe that your neighbors are using this, excessive form of corporal punishment on their children, can you lodge a charge with the authorities against such a family?
Yes. So to answer your second question first, you certainly can. And I think that it is not a bad thing when people do start taking notice of how other people around them are behaving. I think we all have loads of examples in our own lives where we've seen people behaving in a way that we're uncomfortable with, but we think, oh, it's their business because it's within their family. And the very same thing happens with domestic violence, where people think, oh, I don't really want to get involved because that was within their household, I don't really want to get involved. But we actually have to get involved. If we're going to protect the vulnerable members of our society, and children in this instance, we have to get involved if we see that children are being inappropriately punished. Then if we look at the kinds of the kinds of punishment that are going to be imposed, I think that what the judgment said was that Parliament now has to get involved. So there will be legislation, and the legislation will say exactly what you can and can't do, and if you overstep the limits, these are what the punishments are going to be. I would expect that in many cases those punishments are going to be alternative forms of punishment, and not just fines or sentences to prison or suspended sentences, because I think that they're going to try and use the diversion programs, educative programs, behavior changing models.
Well, Beverley, thank you very much for sharing with us the legal aspects of it. And Shahana, thanks for joining us from Cape Town and showing us that there's another way of disciplining children without using violence. And of course, this is a contentious issue. We would like you to participate in sharing your thoughts with us. Well, we're entering a new era. There's another way of raising children without using corporal punishment or violence in doing so. So talk to us, and the hashtag is the Modise Network on social media. We've got to change the way we think. After the break, we will be focusing on literacy levels of South African children. Did you know that 80% of children in South Africa aged 10 cannot read or write for comprehension, according to surveys that have been conducted internationally? What is South Africa going to do is the next subject that we will be discussing here on the show.